let's say you get a fairly decent recreational poker player, and then you get a world-class poker player, right? And they're playing both high stake games or something that's going to produce a certain level of physiological arousal. A very, very well studied, grounded in theory, understands the game, high level poker player might get into a spot or a dynamic where like they make a bet that they know over time it's going to be profitable. Therefore, it's not producing that much physiological arousal because they're so confident that they made the right decision. So even though they are bluffing, they know the bluff was EV and the right thing to do. So you don't see that much of a physiological spike in them, right? But there are subtleties and differences. So for example, in me, when I wore in a WSOP main event, I wore the Empatica E4 for like 5 days of it. And I looked for themes in my behavior. And what was fascinating was I experienced when I had, do you play poker at all?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So when I had the best hand or a hand where I know I couldn't lose, I experienced arousal, but nothing crazy. When I was bluffing, same exact thing. The arousal profiles look very similar from a psychophysiological perspective. But when I was in a dynamic where I was ahead, but my opponent could potentially, so like if I was like on a flop and I had like top set, but there's a potential for a straight out there, that's where all my physiological arousal came from. And part of that reason is because I'm a little bit of a control freak. So in that moment, I didn't have control. I was like, I know I'm doing the right thing, but for me, I can't control the outcome. That's just the law of variance, and that's the law of poker. And let's see what happens. And because of that dynamic, that was where all the arousal sort of came up. So I saw differences for different people. And what we ended up building was a method for addressing what kind of person that is and how to look at that person for information, as opposed to here's some blanketed statement that everybody does when they're bluffing or when they're strong or so. And there's subtleties to it.
One of the, it's very interesting. I often think about this one quote from actually the Tao Te Ching, how the most dangerous moments is when we're either kind of walking up a ladder, like succeeding, but also failing, walking down a ladder because we're kind of on unstable.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure you've seen that with players where, maybe they make bigger mistakes when they're on a high and
Oh yeah.
more mistakes when they're on tilt. So yeah, how do you work with individuals, athletes, players or executives to manage those kind of peak and down moments?
So ironically, a lot of that has been grounded in sleep. So my fiance owns a company called Sleep is a Skill, and she optimizes people's sleep. And so we're a very like sleep focused household. And with a lot of players in very big games, that's one of the really interesting things is like I would track players. They wear this device called the Aura Ring that just gives us some metrics on sleep. And there be things where I'm like, you can't play poker today. Like I know you think you could play poker today, and I know that you think your C game is better, but you're just so much more prone to all of these things because you're not rested. And putting in routines and ways of hedging that. And like if there's like a really high level poker player listening, it's like one of those things where it's hard because in these big nosebleed games, like they run from like, Thursday to Sunday. And that's how this person like essentially makes a living, and the players aren't that great, or they believe that they have an edge. And it's having that certain level of self-awareness. So a lot of what we do is, I guess it's like a CBT framework or a CBT level of awareness where we're looking for behavioral triggers that are indications that you're prone to be making more mistakes. So for example, like not anymore, I guess I've worked on myself, but when I was younger, I'd get frustrated as a little bit of a hothead, and my behavioral trigger was a clenched fist. Like for whatever reason, if I clench my fist really tight, that was like a warning sign that like you need to take a break. And I sometimes when you're faced with things that can affect your actual performance, I think there's too much emphasis on trying to figure out ways to outmaneuver that instead of like just stop the activity. Right. So like just stop. Don't do it. So in the equivalent of a poker game, it would be like if you start experiencing a certain level of arousal or frustration or whatever, you're not going to necessarily leave the table, but you can narrow your range and you could play less hands.
Yeah.
Or like with some of my executives, it's like you should not have that meeting. Like just cancel it. Like you're not in the right frame of mind. And I don't think a lot of people have the awareness or to know when that's happening. And rightfully so, it's a difficult thing, but we solve that with video. So we're constantly recording our clients. So I'm able to have material evidence of like, listen, like, look what you look like. And they're like, yeah, I look pretty bad. So using behavior as a guiding principle has really helped.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.